Welcome to If People Only Knew, the show that brings untold stories to light. I'm your host, Anna Matson. Let's get started. Welcome to the show. Today we have Andrea Keller, and I'm going to call you an expert autism mom. I think that's a proper title for you.
Thank you.
So you have a son who's autistic. Profound autism is what you deal with on a daily basis. And you told me something that I thought was really interesting, would be a great way to start the show too. You told me that you thought your story was unique. And your story is definitely going to be unique for the average person who doesn't deal with autism. But tell us when you found out maybe your story isn't so unique.
In 2016, the movie Vax came out, and at that time, Polly, Tommy, and a group of others were driving around the country to different cities to interview families with vaccine-injured children. And so I took my son when they were in Columbus, Ohio. I'm from Ohio. And when we were there waiting, I'm just seeing all these people and I'm thinking, our story really isn't that all unique. And now with Secretary Kennedy at HHS and being, on X social media, the stories are just everywhere. And it's like, wow, it's just, my story is really not that unique.
Yeah, and it was interesting because when he started talking about, the things that families deal with severe autism, everyone was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not what autism is. Like, people with autism, they can work, they can pay taxes, they can do everything, a neurotypical person can do. And I'm like, I don't think you've actually heard what severe autism is like. And luckily for us, you're going to tell us all about it today.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start from the beginning. I have two children. My daughter is 30 years old. She was born in 1994. And then when she was 5 months old, I discovered I was pregnant with my son. So my kids are 14 months apart. I'm good at math. No, I'm not. And everything was normal with the pregnancy. He was post-due. So he was 9 days post-due. So I was induced. But it was a normal delivery and, nothing. He had great APCAR scores. He did have a little jaundice, but nothing unusual. So at that time, my kids did not get the hepatitis B shot at birth. That is something that is now mainstream. So he started on the regular schedule, what that was at the time. And one of the strange things about him was his umbilical cord did not detach in a normal fashion. It hung on for 11 weeks.
Okay.
And I remember going into the doctors because we'd have to go every week and they'd put silver nitrate on it to see if it would fall off. And one of the times we were there, the pediatrician we saw that day called in, others, the other pediatricians and some of the nurses and said, this is unusual. This is something you would normally see in a child with an immune issue like HIV or something. Well, my son didn't have that. But I've always wondered in my mind, was that a sign that maybe he couldn't handle these vaccines or that there was something,
How long does an umbilical cord usually stay on?
I think anything that stays on, usually a matter of days, maybe 4 weeks,
Okay.
but anything that stays on longer than maybe 6 weeks is, so I'm thinking, was there something that should have been looked at? But,
So how long did it stay on for your daughter?
I don't even remember because it was just a normal time,
Yeah.
So he went and got, his vaccines. And around Christmas, he was born in January, on January 25th. So around Christmas, right before he turned 1, we all had upper respiratory flu.
Okay.
And so he was just kind of getting over that. and he went for his 1 year well checkups. And the pediatrician we were seeing talked me into, he was scheduled to get the MMR, talked me into adding the chickenpox vaccine. It was relatively new, and it was only came out, I think, in 1995. And he had a son who was about 6 months old, and he said, well, if my son was old enough, I'd give it to him. And at that time, I had the mindset, well, if the pediatrician says, then, and so I got it. And that's the biggest regret of my life, giving him those vaccines on that day, because he then started a downward regression where he was losing play skills. He sought isolation. He stopped answering to his name.
Did he have any words?
He had a few words.
Okay.
His high chair was by the phone, and when the phone would ring, he would mimic like holding a phone to his ear and say hello, and mama, dada, stuff like that. But he didn't have he was just 12 months old, and 12 months is pretty young to, they pushed that, lowered it to get the MMR. It used to be 18 months or beyond 2 years. So he became a picky eater. Sleep became an issue. He just jumped constantly, either on the couch, in his bed, in his crib. We bought him a mini trampoline, and his whole life was just jumping on the mini trampoline and watching Toy Story. And he just had this regression, and I was very concerned. So by the time he was 18 months, I talked to the pediatrician, and he said about the hearing, not answering to his name. He said, well, we'll have him his hearing tested. But I knew that his hearing was okay, because we lived near a small airport, and if we were outside playing and I'd be calling him, he wouldn't be listening to me, but he'd hear the faintest sound of an airplane, and he'd stop and listen.
And you're saying he was fine before you
Yes.
went and got those vaccines? Like, he answered to his name. It wasn't like this.
He was starting to eat table food. He was doing some imitative play. There was such a drastic change. It's like, who is this child? He would hold his ears a lot. He just, he went from being, because I had just had a baby and I saw typical development, my daughter's fine.
Yeah.
Then I'm watching him, and it's like, when you have skills and then they go away, it's like, what's happening? So, the doctor's like, let's get his hearing tested. It was fine. He said, let's get a speech evaluation and an OT. Well, after the speech, then they did OT. So that's how we got on the track to get diagnosed with autism. So we went to see a neurologist in Canton, Ohio, where we were living at the time. And he would not diagnose him with autism, because his was just this regression where it would be like, I was constantly watching him. Well, he did that, so he's okay. Oh, wait, he did that. That's not good. Maybe he is autistic, and it was just this slow, loss of skills and changing. And not only was he changing developmentally, but he was starting to get sick all the time. He had constant ear infections. We were either at the pediatrician for an initial check or a recheck.
I'm hearing that it's so common. I'm hearing a lot of people's stories, and that is like the common thing. And like, I'm not on the spectrum, but like, I had a ton of ear infections as a kid too, but my dad was a smoker. So now anytime I'm around cigarette smoke, like, it always ruins my vacations for me, because every time we go somewhere, someone's smoking and I get an instant ear infection.
Oh my gosh.
All the time, even as an
Wow.
adult. And so doctors are always surprised that it happens to me even as an adult. But it's so interesting how the ear infections is like a sign towards something is wrong, because I hear it in multiple different, I would say maybe chronic illnesses, I guess.
Yeah, he was born with bowel issues. He had slow motility. I remember when he was first born, he was having problems going to the bathroom, and we were putting pear juice into his, and that's another regret of mine. He was formula fed. When I had my daughter, I had a hard time with it. I did pump for her for a while, but then when I had him, I still had her to take care of. She was 14 months old, and then I had a newborn baby, so I was just like, and I know from things that you've, it's important. I mean, breast is best. And, I think maybe he would have had a better health outcome. But so he had issues, and those issues got a lot worse over the years because he had horrible allergies, and he was taking all these antihistamines and all these allergy medications. This was later, so say around 5-ish. And I told you last night that he could go 2 to 3 weeks without having a bowel movement, and he was in such excruciating pain. So let me go back to, we started to do the autism pursue, and the first neurologist was like, oh, I'm gonna say he has congenital aphasia.
Did you know what autism was at the time?
My exposure to autism was the movie Rain Man,
Okay.
which came out in 1988. And I was an education major, and I had never heard the word in my classes. And now the university I went to, Youngstown State, has had an autism center. My town has, I want to say, 2 or 3 autism schools. Then there's something called the NAP Center. I think they do ABA. They just bought an old Red Roof Inn hotel. It's that big.
Wow.
And so something that I didn't learn about, I graduated in 1990 from my university, is now
Everywhere.
35 years later, it's,
What
but
about
they're better at diagnosing it.
Yeah.
And they've
We'll
expanded
definitely
the
talk more
yeah.
about that. So do you have any autism in your family? Because, everyone likes to say it's genetic.
I don't, I'm adopted, but I do know some of my family because I was informed who they were and did get to meet them and stuff. But my husband's, I think there's some Asperger's,
Okay.
but no, I mean, no one like my son. I after I graduated from college, I did some student teaching, and then we moved a lot. And I graduated from college, got married, did some substitute teaching, and I had a long term sub assignment, and I was working with kids with special needs. And one day, a severely autistic boy came in, and he ran in and was running around this table banging, the phones that used to have the dial. Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking at this kid like, wow, I'd never seen anybody like that.
Wow.
And little did I know that would be my life.
Isn't it interesting too, the fact that people just dismiss it saying it's genetic when what profoundly autistic person is having children?
Well, that's where the whole idea of the spectrum is coming into play, I guess, but no, that's a good question.
Because if it really was genetic, it'd be wiped out in a generation because profoundly autistic people are not having kids, at least that I know of, unless there's some, bad actors, which I'm sure there are. But in general, I don't believe that they're having kids. And we'll talk more about your son. Okay, so yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
Oh, that's okay.
go on that tangent, but
So we were moving to close to Chicago. So my son had some abnormal metabolic a urine test. So they wanted us to follow up on that. So when we moved to and got our new pediatrician, they set that up. And whatever was coming from that, we tried to get a urine collection from him, and whatever it was, I think it was a lactic acid or glutaric acid, something, and it wasn't in the, so they're like, there's nothing we can do, just let that go. But we wanted to get an autism diagnosis. We weren't, so they're like, you should go to the University of Chicago.
And how old was he around this time?
He was not even 2 yet.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I was on this.
Yeah.
Like, what's happening to my child? 6 months ago, he was okay. Mm-hmm. And then he's, and this isn't normal. So let's, So when I called the University of Chicago, they had a very long waiting list, but when they found out how young he was, they got him in right away. So he was diagnosed by Dr. Catherine Lord and Bennett Leventhal when he was just 2 years old. And what they do there is basically tell you you need to do something called ABA, which is Applied Behavior Analysis. Now, this is going back many years. I know it's everywhere now. It was very hard to get. You would have to go to them or bring them to you. It's not like there's centers all over the place, or they do stuff in schools now. So,
And what is that?
what is what?
ABA.
Oh, it's Applied Behavior Analysis. It's a behavioral intervention. It's based on the work of Ivar Lovaas, and people call it's comparable to training dogs. You have a skill that you're going to teach. You do trials to see if the child is accomplishing it, and then you reward them with something like a cookie or you could look at this book for a minute or whatever. So, but that was what was we were going to do. So as we were going through this diagnosis, I already had him though in therapy at the local where we had moved to. So he was going for developmental play group, one-on-one speech therapy, and occupational therapy. And my whole life was just going 3 days a week. And it wasn't like, well, when we first moved there, it was close, but then we ended up buying a house in the county over, but I still kept him at that therapy place. But one of the dumb things I did was I did get my children then the hepatitis B vaccine, because one of my new pediatricians said, well, your son's in a play group. He might get bit by another child. You should probably get it for him. And this is how I didn't know anything. And I'm like, well, the doctor said, so, So I got him that, which at that time it had something called thimerosal, which is a mercury preservative. So I'm sure it probably created more harm in someone that was already struggling.
Yeah, it's always, interesting to me because they say, pregnant women shouldn't have fish because there's mercury in fish. And, but women are told to get the flu vaccine.
Yeah,
and the flu vaccine, the multi-dose flu vaccine still has mercury in it today. Now, since a lot of people have sounded the alarm about thimerosal being in vaccines, they, in the early 2000s, removed it from childhood vaccines quietly. They didn't announce it because they didn't want, everyone to be right about the harms of it. But they put aluminum in vaccines instead, which is still a neurotoxin. If you look up neurotoxins, lead will come up. It's on the same level as lead, mercury, aluminum. They're all poisonous to us. And I mean, imagine the outrage if we said, we're going to put lead in vaccines and shoot you up with lead. But yet it's the same thing. It's the same thing putting mercury and putting aluminum in the vaccines. It's still a heavy metal that is a neurotoxin.
Yeah.
And so it's just crazy to me that like people think it's okay to just inject yourself with this stuff. But yet, everything else, we don't want lead in our paint. Okay, that's okay to say. You're not a conspiracy theorist to say that. We don't want mercury in our fish. Not a conspiracy theorist to say that. But then somehow you say, oh, mercury in vaccines. Oh, that's where you cross the line. You're a conspiracy theorist. Vaccines have saved lives. Sit down. Shut up.
Oh, you've been around enough now to know that that's pretty much how it goes. And it's crazy. But, that's what they do. But yeah, they did lower the mercury and they increased the aluminum. And it's a crime, but they're getting away with it.
Yeah. But sorry again.
Oh, that's okay.
Got a little heated.
Yeah, hey, I'm glad. I appreciate that because, the more people who realize that these things are contradictory, and it's like, just because the experts say so. But things are changing now with Secretary Kennedy, and he wants people to be informed, and he's pursuing you know good studies so that people have good information to make informed decisions. Which I just feel like I was coming from a different time where you know you're going to have a baby, you get the best OBGYN, you get the best pediatrician.
Yeah.
And, I didn't know anybody. I'd never heard of a vaccine injury. I naively thought, oh, well, I was vaccinated. My father was a pharmacist. And, I've talked to some of my friends that, they didn't even necessarily go to a pediatrician. We did. I went to pediatrician, and I actually was looking at my shot record recently, and I only got one vaccine at a time. And I didn't get my first, and I don't even know if it was the MMR, but it was like at 2 years old, so it's like, and, in 1986 is when the government decided to give vaccine manufacturers liability protection. And if you look at what the shots were, and Secretary Kennedy has said this repeatedly, that there were a handful of vaccines when he was a child. And when you look at it now, and I'm sorry to say, I don't even know exactly, because it changes constantly. The vaccine schedule my children had was very different from what kids are getting now or got 10 years ago, or because they basically added things at will. And it exploded. And so did, coincidentally, things like autism. But
And do you know why they passed that law? What they say is the reason?
I'm curious what you're going to say.
They say the reason is because there's inevitable injuries. Injuries are going to happen.
Unavoidably unsafe.
Yes, injuries are going to happen. We can't prevent them. So unless we have immunity from litigation, we're going to go out of business. So their products, they got immunity because their products were so unsafe.
Yeah, they were getting their butts handed to them. They were getting sued left and right, and that was passed. And it wasn't like they just said, we're going to give you. There was some negotiations, and I think that the people involved, like Barbara Lowe Fisher, she started the National Vaccine Information Center. It was a grassroots, parent-driven. She was involved in this, and there was just a lot of politics that got involved in it, and it ended up not protecting the individuals, but protecting the pharmaceutical companies. And because of that act, that law, it's crazy. Some babies are getting, like my son had those, the measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox. So 4 live, and that took him down. There are babies that are getting 8, 9 shots in one visit.
Yeah.
And we would have never taken a vaccine when we were pregnant. We had a very small list of over-the-counter medications we could use. I didn't even drink coffee, it was just and now you have women getting vaccinated in pregnancy. You have women who are taking psych medications for different whatever. And, it's just a different world because pharma has that much power.
Yeah, and people just think that it's normal, and this is not normal.
Yeah.
So going back to, you said you got him the hepatitis B vaccine?
Yes, because he was in this play group, and I think, like I said, they probably did some insult to injury there. So he continued to stay in those therapies. We had the evaluation at University of Chicago. We decided to contract with a company called Wisconsin Early Autism Project. So they had applied behavior analysis or analysts who would come to your home and do workshops. You had to hire a staff and you would do like a 2-day workshop, and they would say these are the, they would figure out your goals. This was very expensive. The first year we did this, we spent more money than my husband actually made. So
It's
we
crazy.
borrowed money, ran up credit cards, did whatever, because they tell you when your child's young, you have this small window of opportunity. So we're doing the hospital-based therapies, we're doing the home. The goal was to get 40 hours a week. We probably got up to about 30. And so we did this home program for a few years. So about this time, between 3 and 4, my son had a lot of, and I just went back to, I have binders full of like labs that we had run, emails that I shared with doctors or whatever. Just all, I almost kind of forgot how bad things were, like between the gut issues and the constant ear infections and the allergies, and eating food was a nightmare. One of the things that happened to my son when he regressed is he became a very picky eater. And between the ages of 2 and 5, I went back to feeding him baby food just to get protein and vegetables into him. He self-select, very limited list of processed foods. He ate like goldfish crackers, and it had to be a certain thing. Rolled gold pretzels, Yoplait style yogurt. Like there was just, and that's all he would eat was this
Yeah.
junk food. So I would like get him to eat baby food so that, he would eat something that at least had some nutrition.
And how was like his behavior during that time?
He was, like I said, he couldn't go to the bathroom, so he was miserable a lot. I mean, he had started with some self-injurious behaviors. The sleeping was terrible. I was just constantly giving him Tylenol or ibuprofen or, he was just sick all the time, and he was just miserable, and, he just was existing in not a very good quality of life, and his toddler years, and preschool years weren't really enjoyable. But one other thing I got him into was a YMCA preschool program, and that was a wonderful thing for the sense that he learned how to swim there.
Oh, okay.
And that's something we could talk about, because children with severe autism have a tendency to wander, which thank God he was not a wanderer, but they are drawn to water, and it's a huge problem with children wandering and drowning. And for some reason, we don't hear about that. But there were 75 cases of drowning last year.
Wow.
And there's an organization called the National Autism Association who is tracking that. And there was one reporter in Cincinnati who actually covered the story, but I've never seen anything else nationally address that. And that is a crisis. And for some reason, it's just overlooked.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I do want to ask you too, like, you talked about, he's constantly in these different therapies and everything, and, he's not feeling well. How did it impact you? Like, how did you feel during this time as his mother?
At that time, because the internet wasn't what it was, we actually met other parents and had support groups where we physically met.
Okay.
So I kind of had a circle of moms with kids around the same age. So it was like people that got you in your situation, and we could get our kids together, and it was normal for not being normal. But like family members or friends who didn't have children, it's very isolating to have and here I am. I have a 29-year-old son. All of my friends are empty nesters and their kids are married and having children. And I'm still taking care of my son and will until the day I cannot do it. But I've said so many times, it's like people wouldn't even comprehend how stressful and abnormal, this morning in the hotel, I'm here with my daughter. I've never traveled with my children. Usually my husband comes. My son didn't have a good morning, and I was kind of nervous about leaving them, but things got better. But I ran over to Walmart and bought $50 worth of toys, hoping that that would make him kind of happy. But I think what the problem was, he was having some stomach issues, and then after he went to the bathroom a few times, his mood improved. But it's just like everything. I mean, when we're at home, when I want to take a shower, there's nothing that I do that I decide. Everything is decided by what's happening with my son. And is there someone to watch him if I need to go do something? And, people, when you could just get up and, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. That's, parents. And I mean, I'm not the only one. And I did say to you before this, I don't want it to be like, oh, complain, complain, complain. But I want people to understand what families are dealing with, and this is a crisis. Autism is an epidemic. This has been an epidemic that has just been raging on. And now we have somebody in a position to, when he tried to inform people, there was backlash.
Yeah.
So I'm here to say what he said is true.
Will your son ever pay taxes?
No, probably not.
Will your son, well, this will actually change this question. I was going to say write a poem, but we'll talk about that. Will your son ever have a job?
He probably could do something that would be more on the end of making his life feel a little purposeful, but not where he would be actually like going to a job, working 40 hours a week, I mean, our goal is to try and find things that he would like to do. And because we're doing this spelling that we'll talk about, but not in the sense where it's like he gets up and goes to work and...
Will he ever live on his own?
Never.
Yeah. And somehow Kennedy is saying that, the truth. He just said the truth. There was all this backlash. And it just hurts my heart because you've been dealing with this for almost 30 years. Yeah. And a lot of families have been in it for that long. Mm-hmm. And they have just been waiting for someone with a platform to just finally say the quiet part out loud and tell the truth on what's happening to these children who are now adults.
Yeah. I first was made aware of Robert Kennedy in 2005. He wrote an article called Deadly Immunity, and it ran in Rolling Stone and Salon. And that was the first, I was like, oh, wow, and then everyone's heard his story. He was pulled into it by mothers who would show up at things and tell, he's talking about mercury in fish. And they're like, oh, well, there's mercury in vaccines. So that's where his starting point was to look at thimerosal, the preservative. And then he just got more and more educated. And then the next time that stands out in my memory was in 2008, Jenny McCarthy had a rally in Washington, D.C. called Green Our Vaccines. She was dating Jim Carrey at the time, and they did a lot of press leading up to that. I mean, she's amazing. She's one of the biggest heroes in this because her son is doing very well, but I'm going to cry now. She is still involved. The spelling that we do, she was her and her husband were executive producers for Spellers, which is a
Oh, I
great,
didn't know that.
yes. And then she's also working with my
Which
son.
I did watch that.
Did you? Isn't it
Yeah.
amazing?
It's a great film.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think,
J.B. Handley, tons of credit to him because he wrote the book, Underestimated, and that was the inspiration for the documentary. But Jenny is still, she's working with Dr. Jerry Cartzenell, who was my son's first biomedical doctor, looking at, as these kids are aging, that they deserve to live meaningful, wonderful lives. So like campus style living, where they, can do hobbies that they like, and resort style, like something very nice. And if anybody deserves it, our kids definitely do. But so she's involved in, and I think there's like a prototype. I think it's called Community Life or Home and Community. Del Bigtree did a segment on the High Wire with them, and I've shared that a few times on social media, because we really need to focus on what's going to happen to our aging children. I mean, we're all getting older too, so I want to get back to where we left,
yeah.
where it was like he was in the preschool program, learned how to swim there. And it was funny, the woman who was the swim instructor, she had a sister with autism. So she would be probably one of those 1 in 10,000 cases, because this woman was in her 50s probably at the time. And so her sister left to live in an institution when she was like 10 years old. But she really had a fondness for my son, and she taught him how to swim. And that is such an important, that's one thing I think on a national level we really need to address this issue. Swim lessons should be widely available and free for families. But it's even hard to get these kids, because I've interacted with some moms on social media where they can't get their kids to do this. But we got to figure something out, because they escape, and
Yeah.
like I told you, 75 kids ended up dead in water last year, and that's a crisis.
Yeah.
So, you had asked about school. So I kept my son in the preschool program until they kicked him out when he was 7, because it was only 2 mornings a week, 2 or 3 mornings. But he got to swim there, and he really loved it. And then they're just like, so they wanted me to put him in the developmental preschool or kindergarten or whatever. And I went and observed, and there was one little boy that was on the floor sleeping the whole time, because they were just putting him on medication.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, no, thank you. So I think I started on this one thing. So when my son was 3, a lot of the moms in the parent support group were taking their children to see this doctor down in Indianapolis. He was a psychiatrist / pediatrician. So I thought, okay, maybe we'll go and see him. Well, that was a mistake. But then it kind of was the launching to get into the biomedical aspect. So this doctor put every child, at least the ones that I knew, on Prozac. So at 4 years old, my son was put on Prozac. And
Wow.
I agreed to it because this guy said, we're finding if these kids are taking this, they're starting to talk. Well, here we are. How many years later, my son cannot talk. So it was a very low dose. We broke a capsule. We put it in water. He gave him so many ounces of water, whatever, and he was, building it up. So I don't even remember. We maybe saw him every 6 months or something. So when he was getting close to turning 5, he said, your son doesn't pay attention very well. I want to put him on Adderall. So I have a 5-year-old who is on Prozac and prescribed Adderall. I gave it to him for 5 days, and I said, what am I doing? So one of the moms in the mom group, her and I were very in sync with our thinking, and she was like, hey, have you heard about these doctors that treat kids with biomedical, with diets and they're doing something called chelation, and they're doing, these things. There's these doctors down in Florida. I'm thinking of reaching out to him. So I did as well. And that was Dr. Cartsinell, and he got Sam off of the Prozac. And
Do you think that was kind of the first time that you started to like question the experts?
Definitely. It really turned me, but then I had already been, because I was still kind of like, okay, because I went along with the hepatitis B shot. That was the last vaccine that he ever got. He never got the second MMR. But yeah, that was a very souring, like, Oh, and it's funny that Indianapolis, that's the home of Eli Lilly, and this guy put every kid on, and they're the makers of Prozac. But then they lost their patent. But yeah, that was a wake up call. So we started on the biomedical stuff, and they're just, the gut issues, the immune, it was just one thing after another. The biggest, the gut issues, because it would seem like spring would come around and he'd be on, my son was on 5 allergy medications at once. Wow. And he still was suffering. And he couldn't go to the bathroom. And so I'm constantly calling or emailing Dr. Kurtzenell, and he's telling me all these different home remedies to try and different stuff to try. And it was just this constant, it was a project that never ended where, and my poor son was suffering. I remember one time we went to a White Sox game and he could not even walk. He was like hunched over and twisted. And, so he was admitted to the hospital because he couldn't go to the restroom. And Dr. Cartsinell said, tell them to give him this, I think it was called gastrographin. It was actually a test, but the stuff that they used would, help him go, which he finally did. But for years we just battled this. Mm-hmm. And it's awful, the suffering that these individuals are going through, and it's really hard to get somebody to pay attention, which reminds me of a specialist we went to see at the University of Chicago dealing with this gut issue. Pediatric gastrointestinal doctor, supposed to be fantastic. 7 months to get in to see her. And at the time, so I started going to conferences, biomedical conferences, to learn about the latest, things to try and help these kids. And so there was something called the specific carbohydrate diet. And there was, I cannot remember her name. I feel bad. The woman who wrote, it was called Breaking the Vicious Cycle. And I bought the book and I took it with me to the appointment. And I mentioned to this doctor, I'm thinking of putting my son on this. And I showed her the book. She literally laughed in my face and said, good luck with that.
Wow.
She put her hands on my son's stomach and said, I don't feel anything. I don't think he's constipated. Maybe he doesn't know he needs to go to the bathroom because he's autistic. That is not how everyone's treated us, but we've had a lot of that, where our kids were just written off. So it's like,
even babies, mm-hmm. use the bathroom.
Yeah.
I don't understand, whether you're autistic or not.
Well, it was the thinking, I guess, was that he was just holding it in and wasn't, because he toilet trained for number 1 at 3, but he was like 6 by the time we had him going number 2 on the toilet. Mm-hmm. He would put a pull-up on, and then if he could go, he'd go somewhere and go in the pull-up. But yeah, a lot of doctors who just didn't even care how much our kids were suffering, and they were second-class citizens because,
Yeah.
The assumption was that they were intellectually impaired. Obviously, they're not talking, so let's just put them on psych meds and call it a day.
It's crazy. And how old was he at that time?
When we saw the specialist, he was 7.
Okay. Wow.
So he had a couple other. There's another guy that I'll tell you with another medical issue. So when he was 10, I'm trying to think. No, he wouldn't have. But he had 2 other major things. One of them was he became extremely OCD. Like, he wouldn't leave the upstairs of my house. He was terrified at the thought of walking down the steps and being on the main floor. He obsessively would stack like games and books, and I had a picture, and I don't know whatever happened to it. He had it all the way up to the top of the mirror, just things that, all day long he was just doing this. He started eating coins, so we had to like hide.
Oh my gosh.
He ate magnets, and he was just the obsessive compulsion and the anxiety. I mean, there was something very off, like more than the normal. So after we saw Dr. Cartsinell, we started seeing his partner, Dr. Bradstreet, and he diagnosed him with PANDAS, and the treatment for that was called IVIG, and he got a monthly infusion. A nurse came to our house, and prior to getting that, we were trying to work with our pediatrician. Now, my local pediatrician was very good about, I guess I should tell you that we had moved from Indiana back to Ohio. So this was about 2005. And when the new pediatrician I got, the first thing I gave him was a book called Evidence of Harm. It was about mercury and vaccines. And I don't know if he ever read it or not, but I basically was letting him know that we're not interested in vaccinating, and he was okay with that. And I said, my son has a lot of medical issues. We work with special doctors. Do you have a problem with that? And he said, I do not have a problem as long as I don't feel like you're harming him. And he was very good at helping assist us to get some additional help when issues became, when we needed it. So we were living in Ohio. My son started with this obsessive, he's diagnosed with PANDAS. The local infectious disease doctor, we reached out to him to say, my son has this condition, we're trying to get IVIG. And he told me that there would never be a child getting IVIG while he was alive, which he happened to die last year, because that is not an appropriate treatment for a child with autism. He did not acknowledge that PANDAS was a real thing. So we worked around him and got it anyways. And he had that for 18 months. The first 6 months, it was nothing really noticeable. But the next 12 months, he had made the most progress he had ever made. He, on one day, made his own bed, which nobody ever worked with him to do that, and dressed himself.
Wow.
Now, that isn't something he continued to do, but he did that occasionally, not both things together, but on the same day to do that, I was like, wow. And at that time, he was seeing a speech therapist, and she really noticed, we were thinking it was cognitively that he was doing better, but he was just able to respond to the things that she was asking him to do better. But
do you know what the transfusions were exactly?
It's immunoglobulin, so it's something treating the immune system.
Okay.
And it was remarkable. But then after, when it was time to reassess, his labs didn't support continuing with the treatment. So we stopped because it was ridiculously expensive. It was, the medication was based on weight. So he was only, I don't even know what he weighed then, but it was like $8,000 a month just for the medication, not for the nurse and, whatever.
And that was just one thing you were doing.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, the money that we've sunk into supplements and testing, and I've been terrible about not even keeping track, because it would probably make me cry as
Yeah.
to, but it's like, and this is, an open and honest admission. We're desperate. We want to help our children. We want to make them as functional as possible and to live the most, I don't want to use the word normal. People get mad at that, but independent and be
Yeah.
happy. And so, you're trying all these different things. And when you're looking back at when we were doing this, I mean, this is over 20 years ago, like I saw Dave Weldon, who I'm so bummed that wasn't going to be our CDC director, but he presented at Autism One was the big biomedical conference. I actually bumped into Secretary Kennedy. This was in 2019. We got to the hotel. It was in Chicago, and nobody's around, and I'm standing waiting for an elevator, and the doors open, and he's
Oh
there.
my gosh.
And I'm like, can I get a picture with you? Well, I didn't know how to take a selfie then. This was in 2000, and I just got my phone. So he took the picture, so I'm kind of blurry in it. But yeah, I mean, I didn't want to get rid of that phone because I was like, oh, he held this. But
I love it.
but people will say, oh, people are so critical of him. But this guy, as I started and then kind of got off of it, in 2005, if he writes this article and he, spoke at Jenny McCarthy's, and gave a amazing speech, and he's only gotten stronger and more. And I've said it a million times on X. He's never walked anything back. Most people, it's like, oh, you're getting heat for saying this. You better apologize and take it back. And he's never done that. And he gets what's happening. So, yeah, I'm pretty protective and I'm pretty devoted. And he's earned it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, like when everyone's against you, I mean, even I get nervous to criticize Trump because I know so many people come at me, but like he doesn't get nervous to do anything. Like he's like, I'm just going to tell the truth and that's what it's going to be. I used to be nervous like during COVID. I never wanted to be known as anti-vax because I was vaccinated.
Yeah.
And when it came to the COVID vaccine, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Something's wrong here. Like, this is not normal. Like, they're rushing this vaccine. Like, and I just, like, when you have questions about it, you get censored. You're told you're spreading dangerous misinformation and you're killing people just for having questions.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I don't even care. Go ahead, call me anti-vax. And because I know it's coming from a place of ignorance where people say that. Because like what you kind of talked about, like, back in the day, vaccines were a little bit later in life. They were spread out, all these things. And now they're super dosing these children and giving them neurotoxins. And you're going to say that vaccines don't have side effects?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy to me. Like, of course they have side effects. We know that they have side effects. That's why vaccine manufacturers have immunity in the first place.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I kind of like welcome that at this point. But
so immunity doesn't incentivize them to make safe or effective vaccines. They just they could put whatever they want, and the studies haven't been there, and that's why they've got people like Bill Cassidy standing in the way of. But we can't continue on the way we have children. 1 in 31 children have some form of autism, and the kind that my son has is devastating. And we're trying to make the best of it, but it's like his life was stolen from him.
yeah.
And
that's the thing is like people who just say it's genetic, like how do you birth a healthy child and then they regress after?
Well, there probably is some kind of genetic susceptibility to environmental toxins. And
that's the thing. It might we don't really know for sure what it is. Like, yes, a lot of people believe that vaccines cause autism, but we don't have the studies to prove anything. Like it probably is an accumulation of things. Like you were saying, like your son's umbilical cord, like maybe there was some autoimmune thing going on, and then the vaccines, and then you said he just got done having the flu or not even
Yep.
fully off that. Like it was probably an accumulation
Yeah.
of many things, but we don't know because they don't do the studies.
Yeah.
And then you talk about doing studies and people are like, "Oh no, we have all the answers." What do you mean you have the answers? What causes autism? Oh, we don't know. It's probably genetic. Probably. That's your answer? Like, it's not good enough. It's not
But
good
they've
enough.
gotten away with this because there's never been anybody like Secretary Kennedy, who is so knowledgeable, has been in this for so long, knows exactly what to look for, knows,
The bad
you know, but
actors
then
and
he's
everything.
got so much against him. And then when I see the community going against him from within, I want to like scream
Yeah.
because, you know,
Because he had your back when no one else did.
yeah, yeah.
And, now it's like becoming mainstream, but there were years where you and, mothers like you were alone. And you had
Well,
one.
everybody still is alone. We're still
Yeah.
all trying to figure it out on our own. A lot of this, I mean, it's hugely expensive to, we're doing all these therapies, we're doing special diets, we're taking all these supplements, we're going to see these doctors. Oh, it's go to this conference. Like our whole world is just centered around, you know, trying to help our child.
Yeah.
And then it's like, boom, wait, my son's 29. How did that happen? And it's like worrying about the future. Like, and there's so many families, like, I feel like we have a game plan, but there's a lot of families who don't. And so I'm hoping through everything that Secretary Kennedy is doing that there's something for the children who have been harmed, who are now adults. And
Yeah.
I mean, there was a mom the other day, just saying on X how she's at her wit's end. And, it's a crisis. I keep saying that, but it really is. And then the crazy thing is at some point in time, the higher functioning and people in the higher functioning world hate when you say higher functioning, but people are different. There are people who are like my son, who don't speak, who need 24/7 care, who have all these medical issues. And then there are the people who are married with children with college degrees and say, oh, I just found out I have autism. There's no way these are the same things. I'm sorry. And it's a sin that they are called the same things.
Yeah, it used to be Asperger's.
Right.
And then they mix that into autism.
So we have to deal with all these people who get very upset at the language that you use, who are against Secretary Kennedy. PBS just did a thing last week. There was a mom that I kind of know through X who told me it was going to be on, so I watched it. They had, it was 4 or 5. It was Doris, who has a 30-year-old son with severe autism. She was kind of talking along the lines as I am. Then they had 3 people on the autism spectrum. The one girl graduated, you saw her in her cap and gown, and she just found out she has autism. I'm like, and then another mom with 3 boys with autism, but she was really like, autism's great. And I was like, okay. And then they had a girl in studio. There's a, I don't even know what it stands for, ASAN. They're self-advocates. And she was really downplaying with Secretary Kennedy has said, I don't know why I keep stumbling over that, about the 25%. I just don't understand why people want to fight the reality.
So in case people don't know about the 25%, what you're referring to, so recent data came out that 1 in 31 children are being diagnosed with autism, and of those being diagnosed, 25% are profound autism or severely autistic, like your son. So it's definitely a lot, like we talked about. A lot of people like to say it's just, oh, we recognize it more now today. But Kennedy had like one of the top autism researchers at his press conference, and he was like, yeah, we see it
Yeah.
more because there is more. Like you talked about, back in the day, like when you went to school, no one knew what autism was, no one talked about it, and now there's centers and stuff all everywhere
Yeah.
because there's so much of it. But I want to talk more too about like maybe his teenage years or anything, or was there any other like medical things going on? I know you had a lot going on.
Yeah, well, so the other major medical crisis that my son had, he was about 12 years old and he stopped eating, and he would put food in his mouth and he'd spit it back in the plate. Or if it was a bag of chips, he'd spit it right into the chips and ruin the whole bag. But
Ugh,
it was very stressful because he was losing a lot of weight and he was super thin then anyway. So he lost like 22 pounds in 5 weeks.
wow.
And
People
our,
can't even do that if they're trying.
yeah. And so our pediatrician sent us to an ear, nose, and throat doctor who just looked to see if everything was okay. And it was. So then we went to a GI, a gastroenterologist. And he wanted to know about Sam's vaccines, which I thought, what do you care? And I lied and said, yeah, he's up to date because in my mind, he was never getting another vaccine, so he was up to date.
Yeah.
And then he asked if I gave him vitamins and minerals because he knew that we were working with other doctors out of the area. And he assumed that the problem my son was experiencing was I blew a hole in his esophagus from giving him vitamins. So we didn't see him again. So in order
That's
to,
so interesting.
yeah,
I mean, especially like vitamins are just food, you know? So food made him blow his esophagus. And what
but
did he do to determine that?
he didn't do anything. He just basically saw the vitamins we were giving him, and apparently he didn't like vitamins, and just assumed that I had done something to him, that he wasn't swallowing them or getting enough liquid, and so there was a hole there.
But
So
no like ultrasound or
no, I
anything.
mean, we didn't even follow up with him. So we went back to the pediatrician, and he said there's a good pediatric GI doctor, but you'll never get an appointment with him. So my recommendation is, and we went on Father's Day, and my poor husband, because between my son's GI issues with the slow motility, it always seemed to like happen in June.
Oh,
And so on Father's Day that year, we drove to the emergency room, which was about an hour away, and got him admitted. And then we were able to see this doctor who then scoped him and figured out he had something called H. pylori, which is an infection um, in his a lining of his stomach, or he had to go on antibiotics. He was on IV antibiotics for a while, and it took a long time for him to get back to eating normally or whatever. But when you have a child who cannot participate in a conversation, and you could see the attitude some of these doctors already have about, like they're second class citizens, and it's so frustrating because it's like they do suffer with a lot of unusual medical issues. And I don't want to say every doctor's bad, but those are the ones that stick out in my mind. We've had some helpful ones that have made a big difference, but it's not a good position to be in when you have a child that's suffering from something and they're not getting good medical care.
yeah. And when I was in college, I took sign language classes and deaf culture classes and just learned about the importance of having a language. And that's why a lot of autistic kids are so aggressive, because when you don't have language, like, because deaf kids are like that too. Like, if they don't have a language with their family, like if the family refuses to learn sign language, whatever, like they get aggressive because and we even saw this during COVID when people were censored. I just talked to my friend Dustin about this. Like when you're censored, when you feel like you can't get your voice out, you can't get your feelings out, whatever it is, you just get angry. Like that's just normal. Like imagine put duct tape on your mouth and try to tell your spouse something and
Yeah.
see how angry you get.
Well, I feel like they are suffering a lot of unusual medical issues. I mean, one more doctor story just came to mind. Um, my son went through a period of time, he was probably about 8, where he was hitting himself in the head a lot. And I read an email that I had sent to the doctor where he had given himself 2 black eyes and he had a knot on his forehead. And so this doctor was like, I'd like you to go see. This is my son's epileptic now. This was way before um, that started. But he's like, we want to rule out migraines. So we went to a local neurologist. This is a good one. He didn't. I think that the doctor in Florida actually had an MRI and it came back normal, but I don't even know if that has anything to do with diagnosing a migraine. But so he discussed with us what was happening with my son, and he said, "Well, I can prescribe X medication. I don't even know what it was. You could give it a try. If it helps, great. If it doesn't, I could prescribe this other medication. If it helps, great. If it doesn't, I don't know what to tell you to do." And that's how we left.
Wow.
So that was when he was about 8. So fast forward to when he turned 21, he started having tonic-clonic seizures, and that is really stressful. I never saw anyone have a seizure until I saw him have one, and now he's had over 100 of them.
Wow.
So that's the whole thing with the diet. We're trying the ketogenic diet, but he's been on medication. We also use medical marijuana, but I mean, there's just so many medical issues. And what you were saying about frustration. So you've got someone who can't communicate effectively, and also who knows what, I mean, my son's had infections, bowel issues, and now epilepsy. And when you're going through these things, it's like you can't tell someone, here's what I'm feeling or whatever. So
Yeah.
all we've ever done his whole life is observe, and try and be the best communicators and advocates for him. But we've come up with a lot of jerks in the medical field who just really don't care.
Yeah. And so what was his like teenage years like?
Um,
Did he ever go to school?
when I took him out at 7, I took him out and decided to homeschool. And there's some frustration now because at 25, we stumbled upon something that I could have been doing with him from the very beginning. So we did do the ABA until he was 8 years old. And when we moved back to Ohio, I don't think I told you, he got to the point because he was kind of plateauing on some of the things. And there was one thing he could not do. He could not do a pattern like with blocks, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow. And we worked on that forever. It was pure torture. And when someone would come to the door and ring the doorbell to work with him, he would cry.
Wow.
So on our move from Indiana to Ohio, I just decided that I was just going to kind of informally do some things with him. But I didn't really know how to teach him or what to teach him. And when he turned 25 and we learned about spelling to communicate, I could have been doing this with him all along, but it never came across my path. And so.
And it's crazy because like that this is stuff like the experts are supposed to be helping you with and doing the research for you and everything. And you and all the other autistic parents out there, you guys are the experts. You're finding out everything. You're doing the research. You're experimenting, all these things.
I mean, it was like when he first was diagnosed, before we got with Wisconsin Early Autism Project, we stumbled onto PECS, which is, I don't even know if they use it now, but it's called Picture Exchange Communication System. And you make these little laminated on Velcro, and they have a little booklet, and they could tell you, I want cookie or whatever. And we're like, oh, okay, we need to, my one friend that was kind of in sync with me on a lot of stuff. So we flew the people out from Delaware to where we were living in Indiana and paid for them to be there to train us and train the people that worked with our kids. So it was like, nobody was like, It's not like we had the money to do it, but we're like, we have to like find a way to communicate with our kids. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we like, you stumble upon things and you try and do what you can do, but there was never anybody saying, here's what you should do. It was just like always
Yeah.
trying, trying,
Hmm.
trying, trying
Yeah. So, how did you stumble across, and what is, you said, spelling,
to communicate.
spelling to communicate?
Um, Credit goes to JB Hanley. He has been a force, and he started Generation Rescue. Which is Jenny McCarthy's organization. She's the
Oh, okay.
spokesperson for. He's written a great book. The book has been my pin tweet forever. How to End the Autism Epidemic. He has a very famous moment on the doctors where he has a little interaction with Travis Stork, which is kind of funny because his feelings were hurt with the way JB was talking to him. But he wrote a book with his son, Underestimated, an Autism Miracle. So I read the book, and then I saw a couple interviews he did with his son, and I was just totally amazed at what they were doing. So at 25, when I thought there's nothing left to do, I thought we have to do this. So we went to Herndon, Virginia, where Growing Kids Therapy Center is, and worked with Elizabeth Vossler for a couple days, and she got us started. And then we found a practitioner in about an hour from where we live, and we've been working with her. We started in June of 2021, and so we're going on 4 years of doing this. And my daughter has brought this to my attention that our practitioner was actually just finishing her training at the time. So I feel like she probably, has changed her views in 4 years on some things. And I don't want to say she experimented on my son, but, everything, she was new. So some, like the kids in the movie Spellers amaze me. Like they were so proficient, where we've taken a little bit more time, but I'm glad that we stuck with it, because the whole idea of presuming that my son is intelligent, and he is, and he's always done things where I would think, wow, he figured something out, or he did whatever, and I'd be like, well, that was kind of smart. We
And
always
explain what it is a little bit more too.
What spelling is.
Yeah, like the spelling to communicate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spelling. So the problem with our non-speakers is they suffer with something called apraxia, and it is a brain-body disconnect. So their cognitive abilities are just fine. It's getting their bodies to do what So there were a lot of times, and I still, up until very recently, would fall back on thinking, oh, he doesn't understand, when you tell him, go over there and pick something up, and he doesn't do it. And you think, oh, he doesn't understand. Whereas, the thinking is he can't get himself to get up off the chair, walk over there, pick that up, bring it back over. So it's training gross motor. So it's a stencil board with the alphabet on it, and you have them hold a pencil, and you have them poke at letters to either spell words or answer questions. So there's like a hierarchy of teaching, because you're going to know in the beginning, you want to know what the answer is going to be, so you could kind of prompt them to get to where they need to go. And then you make the questions more open. So you read a lesson to them, you give them the information, you ask them questions, and you're working on getting body control to point to the correct letters. And then the goal is to get them to the point where you can ask them something, you don't know what the answer is going to be, but they've had so much practice and they're so good at control that they can answer, so I'm still kind of there with my son. Initiation is a problem. So if I ask him, what did you think of your dinner last night? I don't know how he's going to answer, but he has a problem thinking, how am I going to start to say, so if he goes to the letter I, then I think, okay, he could either go, he says IT, he could either say I and another word thought or it. So it's a lot of practice. The saying is practice makes permanent. Um, we just read these different things and are learning. I'm reading books to him that are completely age appropriate now. Um, he's been able to tell us things. He's got a wonderful sense of humor. He's very smart. His vocabulary is really impressive.
Yeah, because you've posted some of the things
Yeah,
that he's
and
spelled out, and it's really it's better than how I talk.
it is. And it's like, I just wish that we knew about this before. I'm glad we found it now, but I really think that more people need to know about this, because the thing that I told you is presuming competence and talking to him as if we're sitting here talking to each other has really changed our dynamic. There's a trust, there's a respect, I talked to him about things I would have never thought to talk to him before, because the experts said, oh, your son's cognitively impaired. So a lot of the behaviors that we were dealing with decreased. I could kind of talk him down from things that probably would have used to escalate. It's just a wonderful thing. He's got now a community of spellers. Some guys, like right now, they're working on a presentation. They call themselves the Spellers Justice League. And they're working on a presentation to tell people what spelling is about and to, just get the word out about it. So he has these opportunities where we get together and he's with people, that are doing the same thing that he's doing. And it's been a wonderful thing. And, we waited so long to get something like this that I want people to know about it so they can get this going for their children at a much younger age. And
Yeah, because like I said, language is key. So the fact that now, now he's 29, but for 25 years he didn't have any language,
yeah.
and now all of a sudden he has some. So that's crazy. It's major for you guys.
But I know a couple parents have said that they have tried it with their children, and so I don't want to be the person that says, oh, well, you have to do this or that. But just people knowing about things and exploring things for themselves. And, I thought my son was a tough nut, and that I never would think that we would be seeing the success that we're seeing. And it impacted my daughter. My kids are 14 months apart, so much that she decided she was going to switch careers and go into this. And she's actually just finishing up her training this month.
That's awesome.
And so, whereas I felt very pessimistic a few years ago, between my daughter being heavily involved with the spelling, we're pretty much at a good spot with my son. And, they were always close, but I feel like their connection now is just really something special. And so,
and I got to witness it yesterday.
Yes. And I'm pretty hopeful for the future now, whereas a couple years ago, if we would have sat down, but I feel for the people who don't have the plan. And so one of the things I want to see come out of Kennedy's involvement is we need to plan for these adults.
Yeah. Well, and, I do want to just talk about my experience with your son yesterday. So you guys came over. You let him know that I have 2 dogs. Just to give people, to paint the picture a little bit, just so they understand if they've never seen someone who has severe autism. So he comes over. He was very nervous to step inside the door because he thought the dogs were out. And again, he's not talking at all. He doesn't have language other than the spelling, but you didn't have the spelling with you. So he just comes to the door and he's kind of poking his head around, like, where are the dogs at? And so my husband went to the back door to show him that they were outside. And once he saw that they were outside, that they aren't going to run at him right away, he stepped inside. And I think he went over to the couch right away and sat down for a second. And when he felt comfortable, when we thought he was eased in, we let the dogs in, and he like stood up right away because like he was kind of startled that they ran at him. But he settled down. He went up, and I had an empty bottle of
Yeah.
kombucha, and you had warned me about this too.
Yeah.
So he'll just grab someone's drink and just start drinking it, but it was an empty bottle. But it was funny. So he tried to unscrew it and drink it. Then he went to the sink and he spit out and got water, I think, on his hand.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was kind of that. He sat on the couch and we
Played with the dog.
we played with the dog a little bit.
Yeah, he was throwing that toy.
Yeah. And so then we went to dinner. So while I'm talking about this, if you guys are watching the show opposed to just listening to it, I'll put some of the footage. I did record him while we were at dinner. He didn't even know I was recording. But I'm telling you, the average person would have never known that he is profoundly autistic. There was a couple times where he was loud. He just kind of makes, I don't even know how to describe it. How would you describe his sounds? Like hawking a little bit? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah. But it's definitely, it's not words, but
Gaga is a big,
okay.
he says.
So there was definitely like the repetitive thing. So he kept holding the fork and hitting. He had his iPad with him. Mm-hmm. This is very common with people with autism. Had an iPad, had headphones, and watching videos. And he had a fork in his hand and he kept hitting the tablet. So I'm assuming you have
the protector on there.
A very good protector on there. And he kept putting water on his hand and sniffing it. That's like one of his repetitive things.
He's got a sensory, olfactory issue. He loves to smell his feet. He's very flexible, and if he would touch your hand, then he would smell his hand like he got the scent off of you. Yeah, I mean,
that's so funny.
He has his idiosyncrasies for sure, but
yeah. And I mean, you ordered for him. So that's like something, he's never going to order food for himself. Well, I don't want to say never because like
he can through, but then do they have the time for him to type something? But he could have it ready ahead of time. So we'll get there.
Yeah. So, but right now you ordered for him, doing keto for him right now. So made sure everything was keto. And I mean, like I said, I think people need to understand that autism is not like Down syndrome where you can like see that something is different. They look normal, completely normal people. And like you said, since he's been able to talk and we just talked to him like a human, he's not aggressive. At least he wasn't while we were with him. So again, no one would ever notice. And that's why I think a lot of people think that autism is not a problem because they don't physically see it. They're not with you in the bad moments.
Yeah.
You're usually at home. And a lot of people, they don't even take their severely autistic kids out because it's so bad. Like they make scenes, they're very loud, they're self-destructive.
Or they'll like run in the parking lot or, jump up and grab the fries off of the lady's plate at the next table or, getting them to sit. And I mean,
yeah. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a picture so people kind of understand, what it looks like, what it's like. And you definitely went through everything in his childhood, but I just wanted to really drive that point home that it's not that you just don't see it, there's probably reasons why it's not in your face because again, these people usually aren't out in public. If they are, it's little things that unless you're staring at them, like unless someone was staring at him, they probably did not notice that he kept hitting his fork and sniffing his hand, And if they were staring at him, they'd be like, oh, something is off,
Oh, we've had plenty of stares in his life, from kids, even adults, because he will do something quirky or weird and it catches people's attention. But I mean, because, he looks so normal, there have been people but I love when people just talk to him because I know now that he's taking it all in. So even if he doesn't respond to you the right way, he knows. And so when we go back and I'm going to have him talk about our visit to see if he had anything to
Yeah.
add about it. But yeah,
Yeah, I love meeting him. So he's a cool, I want to say kid, but he's not a kid.
he's not. He's older than you
He's
are.
older than me. But
Yep.
no. Yeah. So I had like speed round questions written down, but if people watch my show, they know I like almost never actually go off my notes. And I
I
think,
think we hit everything.
I think we hit everything. So let me just take a look real quick. We talked about this a little bit, but I want to get a little bit more of a direct answer from you. So, what do you think about the spectrum? Like we talked about how, I mean, you think it's like a sin that, like your son is clumped together with the people who are married and have kids and they're just finding out they're autistic. So, like, what?
I mean, it's ridiculous to say this is attributed to better diagnosis and a broadening of, there are just too many people who cannot function and live independently. And when you give people a platform, be it Facebook or X or whatever, to talk about, what's going on with their kids, I mean, the spectrum is too broad. It's my understanding that the numbers, the 1 in 31, they are the legit, not messed with criteria where, it has nothing to do with expanding criteria. These kids are severely disabled and, need help. So yeah, I think it's absolute, but I think it's a whole ploy to water down the, severity and the it's an epidemic, and it has been. And those numbers, I mean, what are they saying? 1 in 12 boys in California.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Um, it's
Do you think that the spectrum should just go away and we call it, like, whether you call it Asperger's or not, we can change the name, whatever, because it used to be Asperger's and then autism, and now they've lumped them together. Do you think it would be beneficial to separate them again?
Oh yeah, but that's probably not going to happen because they want people to be confused, and they want to put the voices. When I was telling you about that PBS show, it was like one mom, I would say, represented families like mine, and then the other ones were self-advocates, and then the girl after was a self-advocate. So it's like they dominate the conversation. It's their voices, and so we sound like, you know, to them we're very ableist because of the way we're talking about my son. But I you know I, I love my son dearly, but the situation is what the situation is. Now, over the last few years, because I just stumbled onto the spelling, I am more respectful of his thoughts and feelings. But the experts told me, oh, he doesn't understand, you know. Um,
Yeah.
The first crime was the injury that they sustained from their vaccines. The second crime is being treated like they are not cognitively aware, because they are, and they deserve respect and compassion and help.
Yeah.
And they are not like these, you know, adult these self advocates who are mad at the world for whatever this or that. They're they need us to speak for them and to help them gain their own voice.
So then what do you think about the measles focus? I mean, especially, even Kennedy had 3 different congressional hearings this past week, and every single one of them, they talked all about not all about, but a lot about measles, but they didn't talk about autism.
No.
And in the past, I think 25 years, there's been 3 deaths. I don't believe they're measles deaths, but more information I'm sure will come out. But the information we have, 2 of them, the recent ones, were actually from medical malpractice, because these doctors just have just this prejudice against people who are unvaccinated. And it was two Mennonite children, and they just hear unvaccinated and see measles, and that's all they can think about. So they give them poor health care, and they actually died from other causes because they were only focused about measles, which is not deadly for healthy children.
Yeah.
That's why we've only had 3 deaths in the past 25 years, and really 0 deaths. Because the 2 were from medical malpractice. They died of other causes, and they weren't given proper treatment. The other one was a lady, this was like 10 years ago. It was a lady that had multiple other chronic illnesses, multiple. She actually died from other things. They didn't find out she even had measles until after she died, and they were checking everything. So, so what do you think about like the hysteria?
Well, I thought it was interesting that it was Autism Awareness Month, and that all went down. And it seemed so intentional with Kennedy because of his vaccine stance. And I think he did a good job pushing other treatments. And, his thing is he wants people to know they have options. It's not just vaccinate. If people don't want to vaccinate, what are what other options do you have? And I know a lot of people were criticizing him for saying, or it came out of CDC or HHS about getting the MMR. And then when you heard him in the hearings, he said something about measles vaccine. And we all know there isn't a measles vaccine. And I think he's very deliberate with his words. But I've seen this so many times where there's a measles outbreak over the last 20 some years, and it's totally used as a tool to scare people.
Yeah, we've had measles every single year. People
Yeah.
think it's been eradicated. That is a complete lie.
Yeah.
What they say is we haven't had, cases that have started in the U.S. So they're imported cases. They come from other countries.
Sure.
So that's why they say it's eradicated. It didn't start in the U.S.
Some of the outbreaks, though, are of the vaccine strain. So it's actually vaccinated people shedding. And so until they actually test to tell you if it's wild or vaccine strain, we don't know. But yeah, I mean, what happened in the Mennonite, that seemed totally and deliberate and as a tool to create problems for Secretary Kennedy and to put him on the spot. But it's like you're saying 3 measles deaths in the last 25 years. I'm telling you, 75 children last year with autism wandered away from safety and drowned.
Yeah.
And you don't hear anything about that.
I didn't know about it until
Now, imagine if those 75 kids died of measles. We'd never hear the end of it.
Literally.
And I've seen this happen time and time again. And it's just like our children who have been harmed just don't matter. And, they do matter. And we have a guy in a position to do things to help, to right a wrong.
Yeah. And so what do you think? I mean, I think this brings me to another question I wanted to ask you. Like, what do you think about all this fighting that's happening in Maha lately? I mean, it just is never ending. I'm like, sometimes I just need to get off the internet because it's always someone fighting about something. And it's typically, what is more important, food or vaccines? Like, what should Secretary Kennedy really be focusing on? So what do you think about all this infighting in Maha?
Well, when you say food or vaccines, and I didn't really get to that point or that part of the story, but food is huge. And I told you how my son became very picky and I went back to feeding him baby food. Well, when we started working with our first biomedical doctor, we worked on his diet. And so we were able to get him. I mean, you saw what he ate last night: steak, asparagus, and a calamari that wasn't breaded, just done in the pan. There are kids with autism who only eat chicken tenders and french fries and, so I would say one of our successes was diet, and we got that through, um, through taking away gluten and casein at first, but slowly reintroducing some of these foods back into him. I mean, I remember the first time he ate a McDonald's hamburger patty, I was elated because that was the first piece of meat he ate in 2 years. Um, and he became, we worked on it, and it took a long time to get him to where he's at to eat, foods like that. So you need to have good fuel to function well. So it's helped with his GI problems. Remember how I said that for years he just, we do see a functional medicine doctor who is a gastroenterologist, but we're at a good spot with his bowels now. And it took a long time to get there, but diet is key. So I think they're both important because they've, but it feels like the vaccine issue has been completely hijacked by the COVID people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's not even like, I wouldn't even say it's food versus vaccines. It's food versus the COVID vaccine is really what all the fighting is right now.
It's very frustrating because, and I've pointed this out numerous times, I wouldn't be sitting here if my son wasn't injured, when he was, 28 years ago. So the COVID vaccine comes along, and yes, we knew not to take it and we tried to tell people, but we were just the crazy anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
So people took it, and there's been a lot of harm, a lot of health issues, deaths, whatever. And I feel bad for these people. I mean, I know what you're going through. Yes, my son lived, but he lived a very different life than he was meant to live. And it takes a toll on the entire family, which we can get to that. But so this horrible thing happened to these people, and all of a sudden they're like, we're here, this happened to us. But, it's been 5 years. Hello, it's been, So even if you take the COVID vaccine off of the schedule, there's still babies that will be harmed and killed from what's on there. And we were just looking at it. I mean, we don't even know what some of the vaccines are because it's changed.
We took a quick break, and you showed me the vaccine schedule, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
We're like, what is this? What is this?
that?
I don't even know what they all are because my children, were vaccinated so many years ago. But it's changed so many times because
and it's just scary how it's going because, I mean, is the next big thing going to be a vaccine for the common cold? Like, do they just want to make us like robots? Like, we can't ever get sick? Like, that's crazy to me. Like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but it's okay to get sick.
Yeah.
And then,
but you're made to feel guilty but that's how
like, you don't need a flu vaccine. Like, you can get the flu and get over it. I get the flu like once every 4 years, and I'm a very healthy person. Maybe I get sick once a year. It's usually those ear infections or something, but I'm fine. Like, you get it. Now, obviously, I think there is a place for vaccines. Like, I have a friend who is very immune compromised, and she gets chickenpox all the time. And the chickenpox vaccine saved her life. Like, she used to not ever be able to go like outside basically, but now she can. She can live a normal life because of that. Like, on average, people don't need the flu vaccine, okay? But if you are high risk for something, then maybe there's a place for it, But just to like mass say, you need the COVID shot, you need the flu shot, like all these different things. Like, and honestly, I'm going to get canceled over this, but the measles too. Healthy people do not die from measles, plain and simple. But if you know that your child or you are immune compromised, then yeah, maybe you need that measles vaccine. Well, just measles, not MMR, but that's a whole other story.
You can't get just measles vaccine. They stopped making it.
I know.
So maybe if they brought it back, there'd be more people willing to get it.
Yeah, that's the thing. They really need to separate the MMR, like, because right now it's 3 shots in one.
But there's several bundled shots on the childhood schedule, so that's why when kids go in and it's like, oh, you're going to get 3 or 4 vaccines today, when in reality it's 9 or 10.
Yeah. Well, I got off track a little bit, but like I said, I could talk about this stuff all the time, but all day long. But how do you feel about the COVID vaccine people taking over the movement?
Well, it's frustrating to me because we've been waiting a long time, and a lot of bad things have happened to a lot of families, and we deserve our day, and we've stuck by Kennedy, and he's stuck by us, and it's just frustrating to me. I mean, maybe I'm naive because I'm just a mom, but it's like my gut tells me his intentions are good, and there's never going to be anybody like him again. This is a man that has been on this for 20 years.
Yeah.
And for the people who just want to like
Sabotage.
sabotage it, it's so
That's what they're
frustrating.
doing. If Kennedy goes down, we get nothing.
Yeah.
We get absolutely nothing, but they're going to fight over their COVID vaccine until the death, basically, of this entire movement, just so they can be right. And I just recorded an episode talking about how I think grifters and egos are completely
I
taking
can't wait to
over.
watch that.
Oh, man.
I I hope that he gets to accomplish, and the way I look at it is there's just so many things that if he gets, you know, 40% of it done, that's better off
Huge.
than we would have been
He
had we
made more
not had him.
progress in the first 100 days than we've seen, I don't know, the
Yes.
past 20 years. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
But I was telling you before, I don't think he's going to pull anything. It's going to be, and he said that very clearly. I'm not going to take away, and he used it for food and he used it for vaccines, but he wants people to have the information. And this leads me to the part that I want to share about the medical freedom groups, because you need to get involved at your state level. You need to, work with these groups that are trying to preserve vaccine exemptions, personal choice when it comes to like medications, um, just keeping people informed and, involved, because say he never pulls these vaccines, but he tells you, you know, here's the risk, here's the benefit, you decide. So people will say, well, my employer, and that's where you get involved at your state level, that, no employer has a right to tell you have to take,
Yeah,
this
I don't
vaccine.
remember do you remember what state it was? I think it was Idaho.
Oh,
Is
yeah, they just recently,
They just passed a medical freedom bill where
yeah,
you cannot be turned away for work, from school, anything for refusing or taking a medical intervention. So, a lot of people, because this was kind of my mindset at first with the COVID stuff. I'm like, honestly, if you got the COVID vaccine, I know this is really harsh, and please let me finish if people are about to tune me out. But my first thought is like, you have to be really stupid to take that COVID vaccine. But then, like, I had people tell me, like, okay, but employers are requiring it. And, like, what are you going to do? I mean, yes, I guess it's still a choice. They're not, like, forcing you. But, like, is it a choice if you're about to lose your job?
yeah,
I mean, like, that's your livelihood. That's your food on that table. That's your children, protecting your children. That's not really a choice.
yeah,
Okay. And then kicking kids out of school if they don't get all their vaccines. Like, is that freedom? Is that choice? No, because again, if parents are working, you can't just not have your kid in school. Like what? And, and there was a lot of people who just really thought they were doing the right thing, that they were protecting their neighbors. It wasn't even about themselves getting sick. They were just like, I'm doing my part
yeah.
in my community to slow the spread. And so I've had to really, work on myself with that kind of line of thinking and have some humanity back in this
Sure.
conversation.
I agree with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of people who just really didn't know that they could be potentially setting themselves up for health problems, or worse, losing a family member or something, because they just thought they bought the propaganda, and boy, did they roll it out during COVID.
Yeah. And I hope it never happens again. If they ever try to say that there's another pandemic, I really hope we're smart enough to never give into that again, because that was just crazy times. Well, it happened again. My stupid camera overheated. I obviously was getting too heated, and that's why. But we're back and we're wrapping up. But I really do appreciate what you're saying, like at the local level, because so much can happen within your state that like people wait too long for the federal government to get involved when we have a lot of power right here at home. So what's going on in your state?
Well, I checked with my president of it's the Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom, and if you want to check out their website, it's ohioamf.org, I believe. So there are two bills. One is Ohio House Bill 12. It protects a consenting patient's right to fill a prescription from their physician without obstruction from the pharmacist, as long as there is no life-threatening contraindication with the drug. Conscientious right to refuse is the one that I'm really behind. Prohibit discrimination of any kind for adults and emancipated minors who refuse any vaccine, pharmaceutical, biologic, facial covering that is not being used for surgery, dental, or medical procedures. Prohibit refusal of medical care or transplant services to children whose parents declined vaccination. That was an issue. There was that girl that was a distant relative of J.D. Vance's. She needed a transplant, and because she was unvaccinated, she couldn't get it.
Crazy.
Allows for litigation and recoup of cost of discrimination. So, let me make sure I had that website right.
I can put it in the show notes too.
Yeah, it's ohioamf.org. But in there, she has links to other states' medical organizations. She said that there are some new ones cropping up, but these must be tried and true that she knows of. But I had mentioned to you that about 2019, they were trying to pass a bill to get, when people were signing their children up for school, that they would be informed that there are exemptions for vaccines. And unfortunately, the sponsor ended up passing away and no one picked up. But they were already having, which I want to say this about, she was the first Ohio Health Department. Her name is Amy Acton. She's now running for governor for Ohio on the Democratic ticket. She was going to go around and lobby against that. Now, why can't people have accurate information? And this is a doctor, and they have this mentality of the greater good. Everything's for the greater good. Well, when it's your loved one that's harmed or killed, you kind of take a look at that differently. And if this leads you into the HHS question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what do you hope to see from HHS?
I want this transparency that he's been promising. As I said before, I don't think he's going to pull these vaccines. I think he's probably going to change some recommendations. But people really need to do their own homework and work to, because I know what people, you were saying earlier about if you have a job. I mean, my daughter lost her job for not taking the COVID vaccine. We need protections in place, and the only way that's going to happen is if we work through our state legislator to do that. And I know they're having problems in Ohio because there's politics involved. We see it at the federal level. It's happening at the state level, but we have to start somewhere. So if you have these groups, do their call to action, support them financially. If you can testify, I've done lots of written testimonials for different things. It's the only way because, when I look at Kennedy, he's got this Bill Cassidy standing in his way, and he made a lot of promises of things that he's going to do. And it's very clear Cassidy doesn't want the childhood vaccine schedule messed with. So Kennedy has to figure out ways to, but people have to be responsible for their own health. So if I was young and thinking about having children, I would think about my own health, how to make yourself
Yep.
as healthy as possible. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, I'm pregnant now and I could sit around and eat potato chips and bonbons. Like, taking care of yourself and educating yourself. There are a lot of good books. Turtles All the Way Down is a really good book. There's one out from Brian Hooker, Vaccinated and Unvaccinated or something. There's so many books out, and take the time to really research it and consider the information, consider the sources, because a lot of stuff's just like, oh, it's anti-vaccine. Well, Turtles All the Way Down, it's all from CDC, NIH, it's very well sourced. And
Yeah, because we're only getting one side of the story right now. We're getting the narrative that Big Pharma wants to give us. Like, we're not hearing the other side. Like, we're not hearing the side effects. We're just told, oh, you're going to have a sore arm. But there's a lot more reported side effects than that. And unfortunately, they're just not doing the studies until very recently now that Kennedy says he wants to do these studies of the real impact that vaccines can have. And, vaccines don't injure everybody, of course, but there are injuries with getting a vaccine. There's injuries with any medication.
Yeah.
The CDC has admitted that for years. They say even vitamins have side effects, which I disagree with that because vitamins are sourced from food. But regardless, it's not a conspiracy that there's side effects with vaccines, and we should do the research ourselves. But also, we want HHS to do the real science and put out real good data. Like, doctors should be getting informed consent, and you can't get informed consent if you're not informing your patients. But I love that we need to take our health in our own hands too, and not just wait around for HHS, the government, to come save us. And finally, if there was one thing you want people to know, what is that one thing?
I didn't think about that. Just that, I guess my thing is I want people to know that what Secretary Kennedy said.
There is a Senator Kennedy too. So
I know. That there are severely handicapped autistic people. I know he knows about spelling to communicate, but what he was trying to, I think, share is that for those people who don't find something that's going to help them communicate, and, that will be the life that these people will lead. And, they deserve better. And so, he's telling the truth. He's working very hard on our behalf, and I hope that people will continue to support him and believe in him, because he's been in this a long time. And you see when he talks about children that have been harmed by vaccines who have autism, he gets very emotional, and that can't be faked. That's genuine.
Yeah.
And, like I said, maybe I'm naive, but I have faith in him, and I think that he's doing the best that he can. And we need to try and all stick together and not tear each other, down because there's just way too much of that. Mm-hmm. Way too much negativity. Yeah. When he's like right in there right now trying to get things done.
Yeah. And we want to help him get things done, not hurt him. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you sharing your son with us. I think this is just very informative, and, I really hope a lot of people listen to it with an open mind, because, these are real struggles that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of families are dealing with, and you deserve to have resources, and you deserve to have the microphone to tell your story, and you shouldn't be just blown off that you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. I mean, you've even been sent death threats just for telling your story, and it's wild.
That was a wild one.
Yeah. So I appreciate you coming out here and telling your story, and yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. This was really nice. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And I'll see you guys on the next show.